good morning, and if in other places, good afternoon or good night. um, we are, in terms of time, on Vav Elul, Baruch Hashem. The king is in the field, and we are seizing the opportunity. And Bezras Hashem, and we are on page Reish Lamed. We began Parshas Chukas, Vezos Chukas HaTorah, and the Rebbe began by, usually as the Maimar begins with usually with questions on a pasuk from the parsha or something like that, and then continuing the hemshech, and that's why it's a hemshech. It's a sequence of Maimarim. But last time the Rebbe presented, Sterna, please mute yourself. The Rebbe presented 3 questions about the first pasuk. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe vel Aaron le'emor. Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, Vezos Chukas HaTorah. This is the law of Torah, asher tziva havaya le'emor, that Hashem commanded to say. So we asked 3 questions. Number 1, why in this pasuk the name Havaya, the name of Hashem, is mentioned twice? If it says in the beginning, Vaydaber Havaya el Moshe vel Aaron le'emor, this is Chukas HaTorah. Why you have to say that Asher Tziva Havaya? It says that Havaya is speaking the law and saying the law. So why is it that Havaya commanded? Why Havaya has to say that? So why twice Havaya? Number 2, the Medrash explains that Chukas HaTorah, the law of Torah, refers to Chakikas Shamayim Va'aretz, to the creation of heaven and earth, that is called in the Tanakh Chakika, or in the Medrash is called Chakika. I'm not sure if it's in the Tanakh, if there's, Im lo chukos shamayim va'aretz barati, So in the Torah it says that it associates the creation of shamayim va'aretz to chakika, to engraving or carving through. And the Rebbe presents a question. We learn that spiritually chakika, engraving letters, verses, to writing letters, is the difference in terms of bitul. In engraving, in Hakika, there is no self. The letter is made out of the stone itself. In ksiva, in oisios haksiva, in the letters of writing, the ink is something additional to the parchment and stands out, and therefore represents yesh. So how do you compare the Chukas HaTorah, which means the bitul of Torah to Elokus, to Chukas Shamayim Va'aretz? The whole inyan of Shamayim Va'aretz is a yesh that has to bebattle itself to Elokus. So how you compare between the bitul of Torah to Elokus and the bitul of Shamayim Va'aretz to Elokus? That's the second question. And the last question, I would say that the second and the third are connected. Okay, the third, the emphasis is more, how can you call creation Hakika? Because the whole union of creation is a yesh, and Hakika is the union of bitul, of Ein. That's the second question. The third one, altogether, how does the Medrash connect the two? Between the Torah and Shamayim Va'aretz, the Chukas HaTorah and the Chukas Shamayim Va'aretz. How does the Medrash connect the two, since we know that what is present and nimshach and brought down, what kind of elokus is brought down through Torah? the godliness that is brought down through Torah and the consciousness of Torah is godliness that is beyond the world, above creation. And the godliness that is associated with Shamayim Va'aretz is the godliness that is limited to creation. And it is proportionate to the world. So these are completely two levels of godliness. Torah is beyond world, and Shamayim Va'aretz is Elokus, which is measured to world. So how do you compare the two? So we have these three questions. And these three questions are the key to enter the sequence, the Hemshech HaMaimarim. And in terms of the Hemshech, Rabbi Gopini says that it was explained at length. The biur, the explanation of Me'ein HaMa'or. That the Or of Sof is Me'ein HaMa'or, is similar to the Ma'or, to the luminary, to the source. And we said that resolves two basic, that gives this view two advantages regarding two basic principles of Kabbalah, which is number one, Ani Havai Lo Shanisi, that I, Havai, does not change, which means there's no impact, there's no change on Havai, the God himself, as a result of creation. And if you say that creation is done through Or of Ein Sof and not Atzmus, you solved it. You have the advantage of Ani Havai Lo Shanisi. What is subjected to Shanisi, to change? Or of Ein Sof, but not me. How is that? Or Me'ein HaMa'or. Or itself does not have that power to create and to create Tzimtzumim and so on. All this is done bekoach ha'atzmus, with the power of Atzmus. Why? Because of the bitul of the light to its source. And because of this bitul, the light carries the power of the source to create. Fine. So that solves number one, Ani Havai Lo Shanisi. Because it's the Or of Ein Sof that creates, and therefore Havai. In this case, God, as he is in relation to himself, he is Metzius, Bilti Nimtza, as we learned from the Rambam. He is non-existential, and therefore he has no shaykhus to worlds and to creation whatsoever. And therefore, Ani Havai Lo Shanisi. So how does world get created? Or of Ein Sof. How Or of Ein Sof is the power? Me'ein HaMa'or. Okay? We all got it, right? Right. Number two, it does not reject. On the contrary, it is inclusive, it includes the opinion of the Ramak. What is the Shita of the Pardes, of the Ramak? Pardes means orchard, because his famous book is Pardes Rimonim, which is really like a Kabbalistic encyclopedia. The orchard of pomegranates, Pardes Rimonim. That's the famous book of the Moshe Cordovero. So his Shita is only Atzmus it can be called Ein Sof. So when we learn thoroughly his Shita, we learn what Ein Sof is, which everybody agrees. Ein Sof means Ein Sof li spashtuso, to its ability to expand itself and to manifest itself, and that he is mufshat mikol toarim, that he is mushlal, that he is negated from any descriptions of forms. So the Shita of the paradise of the Ramak is who is that? Only Atzmus. Only God himself can be called Ein Sof. All the other dargos, levels, are not truly infinite. Why? Because any other dargos is dargos of Or. Or has a beginning and therefore is not really Ein Sof. And if it has any infinity, it's because of the Ma'or. Like we see infinite behavior in nature. Like, the luminaries do not decrease from their light. There is eternity in certain creations. So he says this eternity is because of the Ma'or. The Ma'or invested Ein Sof in them. But really anything but Atzmus is really not true Ein Sof. Really not true infinite. So when you take on the Shita of the Alter Rebbe, the Arizal, the Alter Rebbe, that it's Or Ein Sof, Mein HaMa'or, so you don't contradict the Ramak. You agree that only Atzmus is Ein Sof, and therefore only Atzmus can create. And true, the Or Ein Sof itself is not really Ein Sof, because it has a beginning, it begins from the Ma'or, and therefore it's not intrinsically really Ein Sof. But Me'ein HaMa'or, that enables it to carry the quality of Atzmus. So we're not contradicting the Ramak. We say, we agree. The Alter Rebbe agrees that with the Ramak that it's true, only Atzmus is really Ein Sof, and only Atzmus can create. And the reason why the Or carries these qualities, because it's bitul to the Ma'or, to Atzmus. Fine. These are the two advantages. Ani Havai Lo Shanisi, that the Mekubalim Rishonim are very careful to keep. So we keep that. And we also keep the Ramak that says only Atzmus is Ein Sof and only Atzmus can create. Right. And Or Ein Sof carries those qualities of Atzmus. Now says Rabbi Gopin, in the previous Maimar, Vayolech Havayes Hayam, it was explained that within the Or, as we just said, is present the power of the Ma'or. Within the light, there is present the power of the luminary. But, we did say that the reason is the bitul of the light to the Ma'or. But still, Rabbi Gopin is saying here that we didn't explain the reason for it. Why is it that the light carries the power of the Ma'or? And therefore, in this Maimar that we are learning, Chukas, we will focus a lot on Or, on the concept of Or, of light. Now, as I said to you last time, we're beginning to focus on Or Ein Sof. The whole purpose is to understand the Inyan of Or Ein Sof. And the presentation of the Shitas of the early Mekubalim and the Ramak was to lead to this discussion of what is Or Ein Sof. So now we will dive into the subject of Or and Ma'or, light and luminary, light and its source, which is different, and the differences between Or and Ma'or and other manners of Ashpah, of divine flow. And according to this, we will understand how these two elemental things are interwoven and including one and the other. So we will go in deeply into the subject of Or, and to begin with, as I already mentioned, the discussion will be the difference between Or and Shefa, light and flow. Shefa means flow. And as I said already, the early Mekubalim and the Chokrim, the philosophers, the Rambam, use the term Shefa. And the later Mekubalim, the Ari, Avodas HaKodesh, the Ramak, use the term Or instead of Shefa. Shefa means flow, Or means light. And we need to understand why, and we will further on understand that both of them apply. Each one is shaykh to its realm, as we will learn. But why the usage of terminology and words shifted a little bit between the early Mekubalim and the later Mekubalim. First of all, to say that the early Mekubalim did not have to be so careful with words and so particular because they saw much more. And a word immediately triggered what they saw. They didn't have to spend so much time on words. The later Mekubalim, as the Giluim are lesser and lesser, needed more words because they saw less than the early ones. And therefore the words had to be very, very exact in order to communicate the divine revelation. But here we have a question. We will have a question. I'm really skipping ahead a little bit. But we will have a question why this shift from the emphasis from Shefa, flow, to Or, light. It seems that the first one is preferable. Why? Because Shefa means flow. It could be any flow. It could be Shefa Or, it could be flow of light. It could be Shif'as Mayim, it could be a flow of water. It could be Shefa Brachos, a flow of blessings. This term is much more flexible. Or is only one type of flow. Or is much more formulated, much more limited. It's only one kind of flow. It's light. It's not water, it's not money, it's not health, it's not blessings, it's not whatever else is. Shif'as Chochma, Shefa Chochma. Shefa could be anything. Isn't it better to use Shefa, flow, than light? So we will have to learn the milas of light, because of which the later Mekubalim use this term more than Shefa. And then we will find when we should use the term Shefa and when we should use the term Or. Bezat Hashem. All this in order to understand eventually what Or Ein Sof is. And good luck to anyone who gets there. All right, we are ready to the second paragraph on page Resh Lamed. Ulahavin kol ze. Now, first, to understand all this, Rebbe has to preface. Yesh להקדים מה שנתבאר לאל. We have to preface with what we explained before in the previous maimar, ויולך אביי הים, שבהכרח לומר שיש מדרגה זולס העצמוס, שנקרא אין סוף. There is, you have to. And now we are going to go deeper into the discussion. It goes deeper. It's not harder to understand, but you really have to follow. Because it goes deeper, it dissects, and it makes our understanding deeper and deeper. So we got comfortable with all the explanations of the previous Maimar, hopefully. But now the Rebbe will challenge it a little bit. So what was explained before? שבהכרח לומר, that we came to the conclusion through the Arizal and the Alter Rebbe that there is another madrega other than Atzmus, Zulas Atzmus, other than the essence of God, God himself, שנקרא Ein Sof, that is called Ein Sof. So when the Zohar says Ein Sof, it doesn't mean Atzmus. There is another Madrega beside Atzmus. It is called Or Ein Sof. Ein Sof. Ein Sof. What is it? It's really Or Ein Sof and not Atzmus. That's what the Rebbe will show and will prove. But we came to the conclusion that is something in addition to Atzmus that is called Ein Sof, Vehu B'chinas Ha'or, and that is the light. שהוא בחינת הערה לבד, וכעין ואפס לגבי עצמוס. That or is only הערה. Or means only a reflection. When you look at the mirror, or when you look at the sunlight, it's not the sun itself. You look at the mirror, it's not you, it's your הערה. It's just your reflection. So or is only ha'ara or ha'ain ba'efes, and completely nothingness or insignificant in comparison to Atzmus. There's nothing of Atzmus in the or. There's nothing of Atzmus of the person in the mirror. And therefore he can walk away from the mirror and not get a panic attack that part of him remains in the glass there in the mirror. ומכל מקום, nevertheless, even though it's not only a reflection and only הערה, nevertheless, מכל מקום, הוא בבחינת אין סוף. It is in an aspect of infinity, of אין סוף. לפי שהאור מעין המאור כולו. Why? Because that light is similar or reflective, a reflection of the luminary. So again, let's summarize so far. In order to settle and to resolve the questions on the Pasuk Vezos Chukas HaTorah, the three questions we presented, we have to come back, says the Rebbe, to the Chidush of the Alter Rebbe regarding Or Me'ein HaMa'or, the light that resembles the luminary. That teaches us that there is a level besides Atzmus that is Ein Sof, as the Shita of Nekubalim, as everybody viewed Ein Sof, and that is Or Ein Sof. It's true that the Or itself is really nothing, it's only ha'ara, it's only a reflection of Atzmus, and it's totally battle, has no existence of itself. The moment you walk away from the mirror, the or disappears, the image disappears. The moment you put something in between the ray of the sun and the sun, the ray disappears. Completely battle to Atzmus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nevertheless, since it's me'ein ha'ma'or, it's a reflection, it's a full reflection of the light. So in other words, if you stand in front of a good mirror, it's a good quality mirror, it will reflect exactly what you are, how you look. So it's very interesting. Everything is there, and in that case, ha'ara means a full reflection of the source. And as I mentioned before, and I mentioned it here again, that there are certain terms in Kabbalah and Hasidus that are used in different ways. It depends where and when. One of them is ha'ara. When you talk about or, ha'ara means a reflection that fully reflects the source. But when you talk about ha'ara regarding memale, or memale, or shefa, we will learn soon, then ha'ara means tzimtzum. So sometimes ha'ara means a full reflection of the source, and sometimes ha'ara means tzimtzum, and therefore only a external and the lowest aspect of the source comes down into the lower level. So it depends. Here we're talking about the first one. That means ha'ara, it's a full reflection. It's nothing by itself, yet it's a full reflection of the source. Me'ein ha'ma'or. It fully resembles the source. And therefore, it has in it the tchunos, the qualities of the source, and including the infinity of the source, the Ein Sofness of the source, and its ability to create. That's why the light has these qualities. Not of itself, but because me'ein ha'ma'or, it resembles and reflects authentically and fully the source. ולהבין זה בתוספת ביאור. Now to understand this with more understanding. Follow me, says the Rebbe Rashab. צריך להבין עניין אור אין סוף. We really want and need to understand the subject of Or Ein Sof, of what Zohar calls Or Ein Sof, and Kabbalah calls Or Ein Sof. In other words, in order to understand the advantage and the virtues of Or Me'ein HaMa'or, we have to explain the concept Or Ein Sof. As we already know, and mentioned last time as well, I think, generally to the terminology of Or Ein Sof, there are two perushim. There are two meanings, possible meanings. One is Or Shel Ein Sof, that the Or itself, the light itself, is not infinite. Rather, Or Ein Sof means it's the light of the infinite. Meaning, like the Ramak, Atzmus is infinite, and the Or is light from the infinite. But it doesn't mean that the Or is infinite. Meaning, in this first view, Or Ein Sof, Ein Sof is the source of the light, not the light. So Or Ein Sof means there is a source, it is Ein Sof, and this is the light that comes out of this Ein Sof. This is the first meaning, Or Ein Sof. What's the second meaning? Or shehu atzmo Ein Sof, that the Or is itself Ein Sof, that the Or itself is infinite. And we follow the second. דהנה ידוע ומבואר במקום אחר. It is known and explained elsewhere. דעניין אור אין סוף, אין הכוונה אור של אין סוף. That we follow the Shita, and it's explained already at length elsewhere, that when we say Or Ein Sof, we don't mean that it's a light that comes from the infinite. We mean it is infinite light. The light itself is infinite. דלפי זה יהיה הכוונה באין סוף על העצמוס, ואי אפשר לומר כן. Because, says the Rebbe, now comes the analysis. We'll follow the analysis and the reasoning. Chabad. If you follow the opinion generally here associated with the Ramak, and listen, the Ramak was at least as intelligent as all of us. So we have to take, as I said before, we have to take their views very respectfully, because there is emes, elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim, and we need to understand how it all evolves. But it's not that one is complete, one is off, one is wrong, one is right. We are not at all in the place to say that even. Okay, but yet the Rebbe is enlightening us, thank God. And he's saying that if you say the first opinion about Or Ein Sof, meaning that is Or Shel Ein Sof, that means that you call Atzmus Ein Sof, as we agreed before. As Ramak shows, Atzmus is Ein Sof. There are problems with that, says the Rebbe. ואי אפשר לומר כן. You cannot say that Atzmus is Ein Sof. And now the Rebbe will bring three reasonings why you cannot say on the Atzmus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, God himself, that he is Ein Sof. And this is the first. The Al-Atzmus, if you really point to Atzmus, lama nomar Ein Sof? Why should we call it Ein Sof? What should we call it, ladies, precious friends and ladies? What should we call Atzmus? What is better to call than Ein Sof? It's right in front of you. What is better, Ruchama? What is better? Yes, Ruchama. What is better than calling God no end?
No beginning.
No beginning. אין לו תחילה. If you want to point to Atzmus, why are you saying Ein Sof? The other thing that could be Ein Sof is Ein Sof, unless Hashem decides to stop it, to the existence of the light, of the sun and its light, nothing changes. Nitzchius, eternity, that's certain things eternal. If you want to point to Atzmus, Ein lo tchila. It has no beginning, which the Ramak says that's the true definition of Ein Sof. Take, as when we learn what is really Ein Sof. So why you call it Ein Sof? Call it Ein Tchila Tchila. שזה מעלה יתרה על Ein Sof, which Ein Tchila, no beginning, is way higher advantage and virtue over no end, because something can have a beginning and no end, but which means, as we explained in the previous Maimar, kol kadmon nitzchi velo kol nitzchi kadmon. Anything which is kadmon, which means primordial, kadmon. What is kadmon? Ein lo tchila. Right? Kadmon, primordial, means ein lo tchila. Rabbi Menachem Azaria from Pano. The Rameh says, any kadmon is for sure nitzchi. Anything that is primordial is for sure eternal, but not everything that is nitzchi is kadmon. Not everything that is eternal is primordial, has no beginning. Many things have beginning, but have no end. So there is a maila of ein lo tchila over ein lo sof.
What are many things that have no end? Like just nature, the sun, the moon, the sky.
Yeah,
Just
חוקות שמיים בארץ, קיץ, but the seasons, the days, the קיץ והחורף, the day and night, many things have eternity to them.
We could say that they could technically end.
They don't.
But they don't. But
right, you could, exactly, because they have a beginning. They conceptually, technically, they are not, because Hashem puts in nitzchius in them. But really, of themselves, they could end. You are totally right. And therefore, their nitzchius is because Hashem decides that they should be nitzchi. It's invested in them from the
marvel. We marvel every day. Oh, what a beautiful day today is. Like it's a surprise in a way, you know, like
yeah, because it's the nature of nature to be nifsad, to how do you say nifsad in English? To be diminished, to lose its power, to lose its existence, to deteriorate, to get old. So time doesn't have eternity, and unless Hashem makes it above time, and space doesn't have eternity. All these things, creation doesn't have eternity of its own, unless Hashem invests the eternity in it. And therefore, kol kadmon is nitzchi, but not every nitzchi is kadmon. And therefore, when it says, claims the Rebbe, when the Kabbalah says Or Ein Sof, it cannot be Or Shel Ein Sof, because you cannot call Atzmus Ein Sof. You should call Atzmus Ein Lo Tchila, has no beginning. Don't call it has no end. So that means that the Zohar doesn't mean Atzmus. That the Zohar means Or Ein Sof, not Atzmus. You cannot call Atzmus, that's number one. You cannot call Atzmus Ein Sof. You should call Atzmus Ein Lo Tchila. Number one. Number two, וגם, also, al Atzmus, here the Rebbe is proving why there is another aspect. When Zohar says, when Kabbalah says, Ein Sof, Kabbalah doesn't mean Atzmus. Kabbalah means, the Zohar means Or Ein Sof. And the Rebbe is proving. Number one, on Atzmus you cannot say Ein Sof, you should say Ein Lo Tchila. Number two, וגם על עצמוס אינו שייך לומר אין סוף להספשטוסו. Really, we said about what defines, we said two things that define Ein Sof. When we learn what is Ein Sof, we said that there are two things that define Ein Sof. What are the two things that define Ein Sof? Tell me, please. What are the two qualities that define Ein Sof? Number one, Ein Sof l'hispashtuso. There is no end to its extension, expansion, and manifestation. Right? That's Ein Sof. No end. It goes, it goes, it goes, it goes, no end. Yes? That's number one. What's the other? That is negated from any descriptions. It has no form, no description whatsoever. שלילת הגבול, שלילת בלי גבול, שלילת החיוב, שלילת השלילה. You cannot say what it is, you cannot say what it is not, nada, nothing. This what defines Ein Sof, right? Says the Rebbe, oh, so if this is the case, you cannot call Atzmus Ein Sof. I'll tell you why. Because וגם על עצמוס אינו שייך לומר אין סוף להספשטוסו. If you define Ein Sof as Ein Sof להספשטוסו, which, yes, that's the definition of Ein Sof, something that goes on infinitely, you cannot say it on Atzmus. Why? Because the Atzmus אינו בבחינת הספשטוס. Atzmus is not mispashet. Essence is not extending. It's not manifesting. It's not expressed. It's not showing on and on and on anything. Etzem remains in its essential state. It's not extended. It's not showing itself. It's not mispashet. It's not expanded, extended and manifesting as light. So since Etzem, you can define Etzem as bilti mispashet, one of the definition of Etzem, that it is not mispashet, it is not extending, it's not spreading itself, expressing itself. So you cannot call Atzmus Ein Sof l'hispashtuso. If you're talking about light, fine. There is no end to its manifestation, to its extension. How much? There's infinite light, fine. By default, it's not mitpashet. It's not extending. It remains in its point.
The influence, says, right?
Ein Sof. The Zohar doesn't mean Atzmus. Meaning, what is Etzem? How do we define Etzem? The way something is in relation to itself. His pashtus is not the way something is in relation to itself. His pashtus means something in relation to outside, to another. So it is a contradiction. It's an oxymoron. That's how you say in English. It's a paradox to call Atzmus Ein Sof l'hispashtuso. It's not mispashet. It's the opposite of mispashet by default. It's not suitable to say on the Atzmus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ein Sof. So number two is you can't define Atzmus with the term Ein Sof, because it's contradictory to the state of Atzmus. Atzmus means Metzius bilti nimtza in the Lashon of the Rambam. It is an existence that is non-existential. Why? Because it only relates to itself, not to anything else. And therefore it's not mitpashet be'etzem. It's by default not manifesting. It requires some reflection, some meditation. But that's the second one. This says the Rebbe Rashab, Halo Ein Sof hu gam ken toar. She just said that. Ein Sof, when you call something Ein Sof, it's infinite. It's a description, it's a toar, it's an adjective. It's a form. ועל עצמוס אינו שייך תואר אין סוף גם כן. After all, Ein Sof is a description. And you cannot call Atzmus by any description. Atzmus has no description, not even Ein Sof. He's no description. You can't apply the term Ein Sof as a description of Atzmus because you're wrong, you're off. He has no descriptions. You're trying to impose on Atzmus a form. In this case, infinity. Who cares? But it's a form, it's a Torah, it's an adjective. And Atzmus is beyond any adjective. Because the Atzmus is pashut, is plain, formless. And you can't describe or define it in any way. Even the highest descriptions like infinite. And because of these three reasons, number one, don't call him Ein Sof. If you want to Atzmus, call it En Tchila. Number two, how can you say about Atzmus Ein Sof li Pashtuso, that it spreads infinitely? It doesn't spread. Number three, Ein Sof, infinite is a description, and Atzmus has no descriptions. And because of all this, and these three reasons are explained also in other many places, bottom line is, you can't take on the first meaning of Or Ein Sof, meaning Or Ein Sof is Or Shel Ein Sof. We cannot agree with that. When Kabbalah says Ein Sof, it doesn't mean Atzmus. And Or Ein Sof doesn't mean Or Shel Ein Sof, because Atzmus, you cannot make an equation that Atzmus equals Ein Sof, because of the reasons we just brought up. So therefore, we don't accept the first meaning of Or Ein Sof, Hainu, meaning Or Shel Ein Sof. We don't accept this. But the meaning of Or Ein Sof is that we accept the second meaning, which is Or Ein Sof means that the Or itself is Ein Sof. The Or is Ein Sof, not Atzmus. Okay, let's see what Rabbi Gopin says about Ken מבואר במקום אחר. Going weiter, going forward in the explanation of the Rebbe Rashab here. So we accepted the second perush of Or Ein Sof means that Or itself is Ein Sof, not Or Shel Ein Sof. Atzmus is not Ein Sof. You can't call it Ein Sof. כן מבואר במקום אחר. Also it explains elsewhere where says the Rebbe Rashab לפי מה שנתבאר לאל. And also according to what we explained before in the previous Maimar, הרי המיתוס עניין אין סוף להספשטוסו שייך דווקא על עצמוס לבד. What about what we learned from the Ramak, and we agreed that the true inyan of Ein Sof Pashtuso, you can only apply it to Atzmus. And there was a reason why we agreed. Now we say you cannot apply it because Etzem is not mitpashet. Etzem doesn't extend itself. But we did agree before that only on Atzmus you really can call Ein Sof Pashtuso. So what did we explain according to the Ramak? He said only Atzmus is the true Ein Sof Pashtuso, and all the other infinite aspects, as we discussed before, like we see in this world, of certain aspects of nature that keep going in an eternal way, especially the celestial bodies, okay? And even Or Ein Sof, of themselves, they do have an end. And only because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because by definition, by default, anything that has a beginning would have an end, unless can stop, as he said before, unless HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants them to be infinite. And therefore, he will invest infinity in them. And therefore, we explain there, according to the approach of the Ramak, that only on Atzmus of Hashem, Hashem himself, you can say Ein Sof Lispashtuso. The truth is that philosophically here, what does it mean? Etzem is lo mitpashet. The Ramak also knows that. So the truth is here in principle, that the truth is that Etzem is never mispashet. But it's theoretically, and not practically. Practically, once something is extended from the essence, it would be, by default, it would be finite. Unless the essence wants to make it infinite. Otherwise, anything but the essence will be finite because it has a beginning. So that means that the only true infinity of manifestation, of expansion, is in Atzmus. Can you see that? Anything that comes out of Atzmus is already limited. Where is the most infinite? Here I will insert the potential of expansion of Ispashtus in Atzmus. That's why we did accept Atzmus is Ein Sof. And the truth is that literally, practically, there's no Ispashtus at all. But theoretically, in principle, in Atzmus, there is the total infinity or infinite possibility of Ispashtus. Once it goes out, it will be already formed and limited. But in Atzmus, infinite possibility of Ispashtus. Does it mispashet? No. But it can, yes. So the question there is, since Etzem is bilti mitpashet, that's what we ask. Etzem by default is bilti mitpashet, is not expanding. How can you say on Ba'atzmus that Ein Sof lispashtuso? So we have a problem here. On one hand, we say only Atzmus can really have infinite ispashtus. Nothing else can, because anything else is one expression of ispashtus. But in Atzmus, there's all expressions of ispashtus. Fine. On the other hand, Atzmus is built in ispashet. Atzmus by default is non-extensive. ונתבאר, and we explain, דהיינו נושא העניין דאין סוף להספשטוסו. The subject of the idea of Ein Sof Lispashtuso, the amitis zo shayach rak al Atzmus. So we explained there, according to the discussion of what Ein Sof is with the Ramak, and we said the Mekubalim agreed that only in Atzmus you can say Ein Sof Lispashtuso. So we explained the take bepoal, in actuality, the Atzmus of Hashem is bilti mispashet, as we just said a few times, that it's not extending. But it's the only one, as Stern is saying, that is carrying in it as a possibility the inyan of Ein Sof Lispashtuso. Exactly what you're saying. The yecholes of Atzmus to be extending is infinite. And if Atzmus wants, so to speak, to emanate and to reveal of himself, hamshachos, different giluim, and to do all kinds of peulos, it can express itself in infinite ways. Bekamus be'echus. Even though he himself is bilti mispashet, is not extendable in terms of what he is. So we are kind of rejecting the proof that the Rebbe says, how can you call him Sof? We say it's in Yecholes. We'll conclude with this. If you have 2 minutes concentration, we conclude with this. The Rabbi Goffin is bringing an example here from intellectual svaros, from svara, from different intellectual principles. Okay, there is kind of a svara, which means an intellectual formula that will resolve few subjects in halacha, let's say. So one principle will resolve. If you will see that you can few subjects, halachic subject, under this umbrella of this principle. Then you can have a bigger svara, a broader principle, a broader intellectual halachic formula, a point, a principle, that expands even more and settles and includes the ability to explain even more subjects in halacha. And there is a broader svara, a broader intellectual principle with which you can settle many, many sugyos in the entire Mishnah. And then, says Rabbi Gopin, it's based on, it's bought in Chassidus. Tzemach Tzedek discussed it also. There is one svara, there is one principle. The Rebbe when he met, when the Rebbe met Gdoile Hador in knowledge, people who were great scholars, that's where they were talking. That's the level they were talking. They were talking about principles of Torah that are all that to one. You eventually get to one, and the Rebbe said that, and he got there to one principle. If you get to the depths of the analytical process of halacha, you will logical process. You will find one svara upon which kol haTorah inyan echad. The entire Torah is one thing. It's one foundation with which you can settle the entire Torah. No conflicts anymore. No questions. And it includes even anything that will be innovated by the future generations. So the Rabbi Gopin explains that the difference between one svara and the other, one principle and the other, is not just quantitatively. It's not just a difference in quantity, that this is a bigger svara, then it can hold more things in its belly, and this is a small svara that can hold only small things in its belly. It's not just in kamos, it's not just in quantity, how far they spread. In fact, it is really the other way around. The higher the principle, the less it spreads. It becomes just one point. One simple point. Of itself, it has nothing to do with any specific subject of Mishnah or Gemara. But dafka because of that, it's the shoresh, is the root, and the yesod, the foundation of all the sugios, all the subjects, the halachic discussions of the Shas. And it can settle the whole Torah. And therefore, about this point, that it is one svar, one point, that from it you can really expand infinitely entire Torah, you can call it Ein Sof Lispashtuso. You see that? That this one principle can be extended and used and applied in an infinite ways. And therefore, you can apply it in every subject, and you'll see that it works, it will work out for you. It's one inyan, built a mispashet, it has no form, it is not any of the topics of the Shas, no form, no tziyur, built a mitpashet, one point, but it carries the inyan of Ein Sof Lispashtuso. And then I just want to finish, because when we finish this paragraph, V'gam nitba'er the Ein Sof Eino Toar. Also, we explained before the 3 points. Hey, well, how can you call Atzmus Ein Sof? Ein Sof is a Toar, is a description. Atzmus is above any description. Ki im shlilas kol hatoarim. We learned that Ein Sof means, Atzmus means shlilas kol hatoarim, negating any descriptions. Ki hine be'emes amitas inyan Ein Sof hu bivchinas Atzmus dafka. But we did explain that in truth, the inyan of Ein Sof is dafka in Atzmus, which means the second perush in Ein Sof that we explained before is Ein Sof, the second perush, which means it's be above any Torah, above any descriptions. We gave two qualities to what Ein Sof is. We said, number one, Ein Sof is Pashtuso. There's no end to how far it goes. Number two, it is beyond any descriptions and definitions. Number one is more external, is how Ein Sof behaves. Number two is more internal, what Ein Sof is. And what it is, no descriptions. Okay? So not only that Ein Sof, as we learn what Ein Sof is, the Ein Sof is not a Torah, the Rebbe explained, it's like justifies the Ramak, so to speak, that Ein Sof is not a Torah, Ein Sof is not a definition. On the contrary, it means Ein Sof, what he has in mind is to negate any Torarim, any descriptions. As we described, that Ein Sof is Shlilat HaGvul and Shlilat HaBli Gvul and Shlilat HaChiyuv, Shlilat HaShlila, negating anything. Gvul, Bli Gvul is not Gvul, it's not Bli Gvul, meaning it's not finite, it's not infinite, it's not what it is, it's not what it's not. No Torim. Only the Asmus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can say, Shlilas Kol HaTorim, that is negating any Torim, any form, any description and definitions. And therefore, that is what the Rebbe is answering Fegi. He's saying, don't worry, you don't have to worry about Ein Sof is a Torah. Ein Sof in this case is not a Torah. Ein Sof, the way the Ramak is explaining it, is Shlilas Kol HaTorim. It's making a point that it's not any description, it's not any definition. So you don't worry about calling it Ein Sof, says the Rebbe Rashab. So the point of all this is that all other aspects and all levels, they have a Torah, they have a description, they have a definition to their Metzius, because they were not and then they came to be. Only Asmus of Hashem, which the expression is mitziuso me'atzmuso, that he exists of himself and not from anything else, and he always was. Only Atzmus, there is no definition to his mitzius, to his mitzius, his existence. And since only on Atzmus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu you can say Ein Sof, it is understood that the meaning of the term Or Ein Sof is Or Shel Ein Sof. Now, you see what the Rebbe Rashab did? He stood with the Ramak, and he said, don't worry about calling Atzmus Ein Sof, because when I say Ein Sof, says the Ramak, I don't mean a Torah, I mean the Shlilas Kol HaTorarim. And when I say Ein Sof is Pashtuso, I don't mean that Atzmus is mitpashet, is actually extended. It doesn't. And Dafka, because of that, it has the possibility of mitpashet everywhere and anywhere. Which means here the Rebbe says you can call Atzmus Ein Sof. Don't worry about it. Because what were our claims? Two things. One is that how can you say he's Pashtus about Etzem? So the Rebbe says, holds with the Ramak here and says, you're right, I don't mean literally that Atzmus is mitpashet, is extending. He's not. I know that, girls, don't worry, says the Ramak. I know Atzmus is not mitpashet, but Ein Sof is Pashtus means it's only about Atzmus that he can say that it can be Spashet Ein Sof. Any literal is Pashtus, any literal extension from Atzmus is already finite, is limited, let's put it this way. But Ein Sof himself, the Atzmus itself, can be mispashtet infinitely. And therefore you can say Ein Sof Lis Pashtuso, as Sterner says, in a state of Yecholes, as a possibility, as an ability, even beyond the potential. Fine. So that's number one. Number two, Feiger says, what do you mean Atzmus is Ein Sof? You called it a Torah. You gave it a description. So the Rebbe says, no. The Rebbe Ramak explained very well when we learned it then, that I don't mean a description when I say Ein Sof. I mean that he is negated from any description in any form. Not positive or not negative. Not what he is, what he is not. Not Gvul, not Bli Gvul. That's what it means Ein Sof. Shlilas kol hatorim. So you can call Atzmus Ein Sof. To summarize, there are two reasons to hold by the first Pirush, which the Rebbe just explained, two reasons to hold by the first Pirush, which means that Or Ein Sof is Or Shel Ein Sof. It's Or of Ein Sof, and Atzmus is Ein Sof. That's the first meaning of Or Ein Sof, right? Because the infinity of the Nivraim is not of themselves, but because of the Ratzon of Hashem. And only on Atzmus, only Hashem himself, you can say Ein Sof Lis Pashtuso. Any other infinity is not intrinsically so. It's because God wanted it. Only he himself is infinite. Is Pashtuso. Take bepoal. In actuality, Atzmus is Etzem. That's why we call it Atzmus. Milshon Etzem means he is not mitpashet. He's in relation to himself, as we define Etzem. And therefore, it's Etzem bilti mitpashet. Atzmus is not extending, but it carries the inyan of the ability to mispashet infinitely, in kamos and in echus, in quality and in quantity. And the second reason why we can hold with the Ramak, we can call Atzmus Ein Sof, and therefore Or Ein Sof in this case will mean, like the first interpretation, that Or Ein Sof means Or Shel Ein Sof, that is light from Ein Sof, and therefore the source is Ein Sof, Atzmus is Ein Sof. We could hold, we don't, but we could hold the way the Rebbe explained for the second reason, that if Feige is worried about calling him Ein Sof, and how can you call Atzmus Ein Sof when Ein Sof is a Torah, is a description? So the Rebbe says, no, if you learned well what the Ramak says, he actually made a point to tell us that Ein Sof means that it's Shlilas Kol HaTorim. It means that it means to negate any descriptions and any definitions. So you can call Atzmus Ein Sof. And therefore you can call the Or Shel Ein Sof. It's Or from Ein Sof, not that the light itself is Ein Sof. We don't hold by that. But you see how the Rebbe is really analyzing back and forth to make us understand very well what this Or is versus the Ma'or. So the maskana of this, so you see how you can see the point of view of each one. The Ramak, he didn't know what he's saying. Here the Rebbe says he knew very well. And it's right what he said. So how do you resolve it? Nevertheless, we will follow the second Perush, that the Or itself is Ein Sof, not Or Shel Ein Sof. That will be proved from the first negation that the Rebbe presented and didn't answer. We answered we had three questions. We answered number 2 and number 3. Number 2 was, how can you say Ein Sof Lis Pashtuso about Atzmus, and Atzmus is bilti mispashet? So the Ramak answered that. The Rebbe answered it, helped the Ramak to answer to us. Number 3 is Ein Sof is a Torah, is a description. How can you call Atzmus Ein Sof? We answered that too. What was the first question? What was the first problem with calling Atzmus Ein Sof? Really, Atzmus Ein Lo Tchila, not Ein Lo Sof. Ein Lo Tchila is the true Ein Sof. We didn't answer that. And the Rebbe will use that to prove that we should hold by the second Perush of Or Ein Sof, means it's not Or Shel Ein Sof, it's Or itself is Ein Sof.
Because Or of Ein Sof is used all the time.
Right.
But what about Ein Lo Tchila?
It used very little. You know why? Because we
Why?
don't talk about Atzmus. Soon we'll see later in the Maimon, the Rebbe bring it in the context, certain context, where we don't even talk about Malchus of Ein Sof. that we're not talking about Atzmus. There's nothing we can say. So you don't say you don't see a lot. Or Ein Sof, you can start talking. Even that Atzmus Or Ein Sof. We should have a lot of respect to Or Ein Sof. It creates us. But there you can start saying something, maybe. It's like when the Rebbe talked about the fact that we say Atzmus. Between God and Atzmus, there's Tzimtzumim. Between, as I said, between Atzmus and Yecholes, there's Tzimtzumim. Between Yecholes and Maor, there's Tzimtzumim. Between Maor and Or, there's Tzimtzumim. And then all the Tzimtzumim afterwards, Tzimtzum Arishon, all of the following Tzimtzumim, B'derech Miut, B'derech Diluk. Why we don't talk about the first Tzimtzumim? They're even bigger than the one we know. Way bigger. Because somehow they had to work out how Metzius Bilti Nimtza becomes Metzius Nimtza. So they said that, and the question is, how come they're not thousands and thousands of Maimarim in Chassidus? I'm answering still for what Peggy asked. How come there are not thousands and thousands of Maimarim in Chassidus about the Tzimtzumim before Yecholes and before even Atzmus? So the answer is, we don't talk about that's already too high and too exalted and too holy from us to. So, but it doesn't mean it's not there. So, Baruch Hashem. I remember when I was a little girl, one time I was meditating about the fact that life has an end. I didn't know that it doesn't end, but I thought, I was told, this. So it really, I was a little girl, but it scared me. How, if it be end, this, like I really meditated on what does it mean that there'll be an end to my existence thing, like really what Mabas is, what Hepech HaChaim is, And Baruch Hashem, we are so fortunate that there's no end, and there's no end to life, and there's no end to our relationship with Hashem, which Hasidus brings more than anywhere else and anyone else, and any other aspect of Torah, the intimate relation that we have with Atzmus itself, with God Himself, not only His Or. And we are so fortunate. Ashreinu ma tov chelkeinu. More to talk about that, we on a more psychological and timely manner, will take place tonight in the Shir on Ani Ledoidi V'Doidi Li of the Rebbe, tonight at 8, Vezos Hashem.